In the wise words of Alexander Hamilton, immigrants, we get the job done. And this has been a fundamental rule for centuries because immigrants have proven that they do in fact get the job done. 1 in 6 framers of the Constitution were immigrants not from the colonies. Our founding fathers were immigrants from England into the New World. And as of today, 18% of the United States population is immigrants, 20% of them being in our workforce. They harvest our foods, they build our cities, and they've literally created the foundation of our nation. But when future citizens, immigrants, are trafficked, abused, or exploited, we tell them that they have to wait. This is the fundamental issue in our immigration status quo that prevents from being solved because of one systematic error, the T visa. Now, before I go into my policy and my policy brief, let's lay out the framework for this video. I'll start by introducing T visas and the logistics behind it, but unlike any other competitors, this issue isn't one that I'm just going to talk about, but actually take action by presenting a resolution that analyzes what's wrong with T visas and what we do as a nation to prevent it from happening again, to ensure protection for our immigrants. Because when we talk about human lives, the United States and all its citizens cannot rely on inaction. Immigrant survivors of human trafficking and domestic violence often rely on humanitarian protections under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which establishes the T visa to provide a lawful status and protection from deportation for immigrants that have entered this country because of illegal trafficking or sexual abuse, also allowing them for work authorization. But in practice, the system has gotten out of hand, and the purpose and the intent that it carried out with is no longer existence. While statutorily the T visa exists in our society, excessive delays make a T visa one of protection into one of delays and one of lies, because we nullify the protections that our Constitution provides immigrants by allowing T visas to happen. Because 3 to 5 years is the waiting time in order to be granted a T visa. And unlike popular opinions, due process is a right given to all persons in our country, not just American citizens, and every second that we wait is a potential American citizen that we endanger. It's a life that we put at risk, and it's a violation of the 5th Amendment of our Constitution. In fact, in 2018, a woman from the Philippines was trafficked into the United States by a wealthy family under the promise of legitimate domestic work. Now, a promise is one that won't keep up when she has to work 16 hours a day, when she's paid little to nothing, when she has her passport confiscated, and she was threatened deportation if she tried to leave. For years, she remained silent, not because she didn't want to escape, but because her immigration status made escape feel impossible. The T visa, created under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, was supposed to be a lifeline. It's a deal saying to all immigrants that were unlawfully detained, that were unlawfully brought into this country, that if you come forward, if you help us stop these blatant injustices in our nation, we will protect you. But today, that promise exists only on paper rather than in practice, because the system that's meant to protect survivors has trapped them into a legal limbo. Just like the woman in the Philippines, this is a story amongst thousands of immigrants a year. And that's only reported because according to Immigration and Enforcement Services, last year, only 1,291 immigrants used T visas. That means thousands more were rejected, and tens of thousands more aren't even caught and aren't even saved by our Constitution because we fail to act. Now, in United States versus Puerto Rico, federal prosecutors uncovered labor trafficking operations in Georgia, where migrant workers were held in isolated conditions, they were paid little to nothing, and they were threatened with deportation if they tried to leave. And Polaris Project also tells us that the fear of deportation is one primary reason survivors do not report abuse. So let me connect the dots for you. If reporting abuse risks deportation and protection from T visas takes years to process, silence is the only rational thing to do because our government doesn't protect. It gives a promise of protection while in reality providing no substance for actual victims. Now, the issue isn't just that the system is slow. It's that delay itself has become a tool of exploitation, and that's exactly why I introduced a new policy to shape this, the W visa. W for the win, but also W because we need to ensure a W for our immigrants that come to our nation for the promise of democracy. So really quickly, let's go over each section, how to speed up the process of T visas, and how to redesign a system that so many immigrants rely on, but so many immigrants have been failed because of. Section 1. Now, this section is more important than it looks because most policies, they treat backlog as an inefficiency. Well, this one addresses the key issue of T visas, which is a systemic vulnerability. And that distinction is more important than we can consider because under Trafficking and Victims Protection Acts, protection was intended to be immediate to encourage reporting. But the findings that I've shown recognize the reality of this situation, that these multi-year delays actually prevent survivors from being able to report. And survivors still remain deportable under the Immigration and Nationality Act, which is being enforced further by ICE movements that terrorize citizens and immigrants alike, not giving survivors a chance for citizenship. The backlog doesn't just delay protection, it actively undermines a survivor's ability to maintain independence and safety, and by having legislation like Section 1, we formally recognize that we justify structural, not incremental reform. Meanwhile, Section 3 introduces that the W visa has a 30-day prima facie determination, which essentially means their decision and their verdict has to be given an update within 30 days, which also is followed by a 90-day final adjudication. Meaning that the 3 to 5 year wait list that people have for T visas gets shortened down into just 90 days. Because protection now is no longer the end of the process, it becomes the beginning of the process. Survivors receive immediate work authority and protection from removal with interim protected status. And this breaks the cycle of having no status, no work, dependence, and then becoming exploitation. And rather, it creates an opposite system of status relating to work, then independence, and then exiting from exploitation, not just improving the system, but reversing the logic that T visas have burdened immigrants with. So to conclude, let's look at this policy on a bigger picture. It removes the conditions that allow exploitation to happen because without any delays, there's no dependence on a single person for work. And without dependence, there's no leverage to abuse and harm these migrant workers. And that leads to the final point, that the T visa system fails constantly not because it lacks protection, but because it delivers too late. The W visa changes this in its entirety by changing when protection happens, because in systems where lives are on the line, future American citizens are between life and death. Timing isn't just a systemic issue. It's not just a number on a piece of paper. It's everything that our nation stands for. Thank you for your time.